Hi, it's me from the future listening back to this, and I'm sorry about the audio quality. I don't have a microphone, so there's not really much I can do about the audio, but you'll just have to try your best to kind of get round that. Anyway, here's the video. Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do something a bit more ambitious than what I usually do. And I'm going to be explaining the entire timeline of the game Sallyface. So before we start, I want to shout out to the Sallyface Discord. Specifically, it was Addy and Jude who convinced me that this was a good idea. I'd also like to shout out the Sallyface Wikia for being 90% of my sources when I was researching this. They're doing God's work over there. This video will contain spoilers, so don't watch if you haven't completed episode 4 yet. The story begins approximately 200 years before the game takes place. The land on which Addison Apartments was built originally belonged to the Rosenbergs. Alison Rosenberg, who lives on the first floor of Addison Apartments. She's pretty much confirmed to either be a ghost or immortal, or maybe a bit of both, because she has been around for about 200 years. And she was the one that sold the land to the Addisons after her family passed away. The Addisons built the building on top of the cult's temple. Now, I'm not sure if the temple was built first and then they built the building, or they built the building and then the temple was constructed underneath. I think probably the cult was built first, because it would be really difficult to kind of construct that afterwards, because it's kind of linked up with the building, but you can kind of choose what you want to believe with that. The cult members operating under the building summoned the red-eyed demon for the first time, and all of the Addisons were infected by the demon. So Terence Addison had to kill the rest of his family in order to stop the evil from spreading beyond the building. So he wanted to keep it contained. The only way to do that was to kill everyone infected by it. So we're still 200 years in the past, and the Addisons build the building, and all of the Addisons are dead except for Terence. Either around this time or after, or maybe before, but I think after, Rosenberg wanted to get a place within the council. We see this in Seeking Providence. She retrieves the book of Forgotten Truths for the cult in exchange for a place on the council. We don't have much in canon to say what went on between Rosenberg joining the council and the next thing. The Red Eyes took over another planet, which means that they're probably, the Red Eyes is a species. I'm not really sure if they are a demon or if they're some kind of alien, because they took over another planet, and this is where Larry's dad is from. So this is where Zarinth Camptor 4279 was living on this planet with his sister and nephews when the Red Eyes took over. The Red Eyes consumed his nephews, forcing him to flee to Earth. His sister Evelyn got lost somewhere. It's not clear exactly what happened to Evelyn, but some people think that she might be the woman on the tapes in episode 4. I have nothing to back that up. Zarinth Camptor 4279 seeked refuge in Addison Apartments, where he met Lisa Garcia and Alison Rosenberg. He assumed the identity of Jim Johnson, and this is where he falls hopelessly in love with Lisa, and he has a child with her eventually, which will be Larry. However, Jim found out that he had been followed to Earth by the Red-Eyed Demon, so they took over his planet, and then when he tried to escape, they followed him. So since his arrival, Rosenberg had been trying to convince Jim that he should join the cult, but he didn't give in until he realized that the Red-Eyed Demon had followed him. And then he joined the cult in hopes of learning more about the Red-Eyed Demons. After that, we pretty much just follow the events of In Seeking Providence. Greg Montag is drawn to the church where the cult operates. At the door, he's turned away by Jim Johnson, who was responsible for guarding the door. So this is when Greg hears crying and he investigates it, which is what you do in the minigame. and he meets Stacey Holmes. Greg talks about losing his family in a factory fire. And the only reason that I bring this up is it's not really to do with the timeline. I just think it's significant because there are 3 factory fires mentioned in the game. So I think they must somehow be linked to the actions of the cult. Then Stacey Holmes starts having an affair with Greg after they meet, and Greg kind of talks her into leaving the cult, which probably wasn't very difficult because she was already having second thoughts about the cult. We see in the game that she gives Megan her necklace to protect her, which is the necklace that can be used to summon Megan. So Stacey starts working with Rosenberg to stop the cult from any further summonings. It's not really clear why Rosenberg decides to turn against the cult, because originally she was a member, but now she wants to stop the cult along with Stacey. However, the cultists either the cultist already succeeded in summoning the red-eyed demon again, or it summoned the demon after that, and that means they didn't stop them. Anyway, the demon takes over the body of Luke Holmes, so that's Stacey's husband, or Megan's dad. Luke realises that Stacey has turned against him and against the cult, so underneath the influence of the demon, he kills Stacey and Megan. Luke, after he's presumably no longer under the influence of the demon, he regrets doing it, and then he kills himself. We can't really date any of these events specifically, we just know that they happened in the past. So probably around the 60s, 70s, 80s these were probably going on, but I can't really say for certain. So the next event that we can actually date is Sal's birth. Sal Fisher, he was born in 1981, which we can assume is after these events or around the same time as they were going on. Sal, when he was 3 years old, he was mauled by a dog, which is why he wears a prosthetic face and a glass eye in the game. I just wanted to clear that up because apparently a lot of people didn't understand the dream in episode 2, but it's pretty heavily implied that Sal has a prosthetic because of a dog attack. In the game, lots of people believe that Sal's mother was killed by the same dog, but Sal is convinced that she was murdered and that the person who murdered her was never caught. The dog attack and his mother's death both happened in 1984. Sometime between 1984 and 1996 is what Larry likes to call his curse happening. It was not actually a curse, but that's what Larry refers to it in-game as. So what happens is, this is when Larry accidentally kills Mrs. Gibson's rabbit, and then the next day his dad disappears. And then after that, the red-eyed demon starts showing up. Or Larry starts seeing it. Now obviously Larry wasn't actually cursed as established in-game, but the disappearance of his dad is significant. We don't really know why he disappeared, or if we do, I couldn't find it. Now we move forward to 1996. Sandy Sanderson starts investigating the cult because her husband's a member. The cult realises that she's investigating, and Charlie Mansfield, under the influence of the red-eyed demon, kills her. It's not clear whether Charlie was involved in the cult or the cult just used him. And that's when we start in-game, is the day after when Sal and his dad move into the apartment 402 next door to where Sandersons lived. It's not really clear why they moved. In the game, it says that they were going to leave the incident behind them. A lot of people think it's because of Sal's mother, but she died when he was 3, not when he was 15. Okay, so from this point onwards, the events are pretty straightforward. So the events of Strange Neighbours, The Wretched, and the Bologna incident happen in chronological order. In The Wretched, they defeat the red-eyed demon, so that presumably would have been in 1996 or 1997 maybe. So for most of this time, it seems like the cult is mostly inactive but still around, because we know that they replace people. They replace Charlie, and they have control over the whole town because we know that the police officers are cult members, and we know that the cult is just controlling everything. So although they're not actively summoning anything or doing any cult activities, they are around. We also find out in episode 3 that Mrs. Packerton is still operating within the cult, but it's not really clear whether she's working alone or not. So after Packerton dies in a car crash, and that's on the same day as the Bologna incident takes place, life just kind of goes back to normal. Henry, that's Sal's dad, and Lisa, Larry's mum, they get married. Sal and Larry become stepbrothers, therefore. Disappointing the Sal Larry fans and the Sashari fans. So Ash goes to art school. Todd sets up a home with Neil near the apartments, and then Sal moves in with them, and Larry was due to move in with them as well. I was talking about the factory fires earlier. The third of the factory fires occurs, we know, because Sal watches the news piece. That's when we realise that the journalist who interviews Sal in the future has been put in there by the cult, because if you watch on the TV in the past, that's a different reporter with the same name. Sal and Larry decide to investigate Addison Apartments for the last time, and this all is kind of like 5 or 6 years after the events of the Bologna incident. I can't say specifically. I think in game they say 5. So let's say it's 5 years after, and then Sal's trial presumably takes about a year, I guess, and then it would line up. Larry begins to be infected by the Red Eye demon, which we know has been kind of targeting him, or at least he thinks it has. This pushes him to kill himself. It's not really clear how he kills himself, but a lot of people, or at least the people that I've been talking to, theorise it was probably an overdose. And also his body disappears, so they can't do an autopsy on it. And by this point, Addison has been completely consumed by what's called the Endless One. So we can presume that this is the evil that he was trying to stop, has completely infested him and just manifested. That's why he becomes such a hideous sort of creature. Mr. Addison, Terence Addison, is pretty much gone at this point. Once Sal defeats the Endless One, then Terence Addison tells him that he has to do the same thing that Addison did so many years ago, and he has to kill all the residents of Addison Apartments. With Larry dead, Todd is taken by the cult and forced to become the host of the Red-Eyed Demon. It was probably intended to be Larry. And Todd, after the murders, he flees into the woods. Some people argue that Sal needed to kill Todd in order to complete the circle. Some people argue that Sal needed to kill Maple because she was out. The police then arrive because Ash called them. So Sal gets arrested for mass murder. And I think they also add to his charges that that he incorrectly put Charlie in jail. I think they talk about adding the Sanderson murder to his charges. The cult want to pin all their crimes on Sal, and he is branded the sallyface killer. He gives a false testimony to originally in court. We're not sure exactly what he says, except we know that he said that he had not seen Larry since graduating high school, which was obviously a lie. He tries to lie to protect himself, but he eventually realizes that he needs to tell the truth regardless of who believes him. He's found guilty of mass murder and sentenced to capital punishment. So for the next 3 years, Ash searches for proof of Sal's story, which she hadn't heard before, obviously. Sal Fisher received the electric chair in 2006. So we can establish a full timeline of events from the Rosenbergs selling their land all the way to Sal being sentenced to death. So the timeline is about 200 years. Thank you for watching. I know that a lot of people found my channel through this game, which I'm grateful for, and I cannot wait to do more videos about it, probably some theories, I guess, because we've got a lot of time to kill until episode 5 comes out, and there's a lot to unpick about the game.